In December 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in a federal courtroom. The charges stemmed from her role in facilitating a hidden network, one that spanned private islands, luxury jets, and teenage victims. But as the trial came to a close, a louder question began to echo. If she was guilty of trafficking, then who were the recipients? No other names were indicted. No alleged clients were brought forward. And in the aftermath, what started as a legal case became something much larger. A cultural flashpoint. From placards outside courthouses to fiery congressional hearings, from Reddit threads to primetime cable, speculation ignited around a phrase that didn't appear in any official filings, but quickly took on a life of its own. The Epstein client list. Was there really a document sealed away in some vault naming famous and powerful men connected to Epstein's network? Or was the so-called list just a ghost? An urban myth born from redacted court files and half-remembered flight logs. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we unpack the timeline of what happened, examine the records that have been released, analyze the many theories that have emerged, and break down what most likely happened to the missing Epstein list. (2005 to 2008). First investigation, lasting silence. In March 2005, a parent in Palm Beach, Florida, contacted the police. Her daughter, still in high school, had been paid to give a massage to a wealthy man at his mansion. But the massage, she said, wasn't all he asked for. The Palm Beach Police Department launched a formal investigation led by Chief Michael Reiter. Over the course of several months, detectives uncovered a steady pattern. Girls recruited by other girls, all young, often brought to the house under false pretenses, paid in cash, and then instructed to bring friends. By 2006, the evidence appeared overwhelming. According to reports, police had compiled detailed logs, phone records, and victim accounts. Reiter handed the case to the FBI, expecting federal charges. But instead, a deal was made. In 2007, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta approved what would later become one of the most criticized plea agreements in modern legal history, a non-prosecution agreement. Epstein pleaded guilty to lesser state charges and served just 13 months in a county jail on a work release program that allowed him to leave most days. The victims were never informed of the deal. Letting a well-connected billionaire get away with this isn't just poor judgment, it's a disgusting failure, Senator Ben Sasse later said. Chief Reiter, who had led the original case, described it more simply: a failure of justice that cannot be overstated. The agreement also protected any unnamed potential co-conspirators, language that would later cast a long shadow over the case. Whatever names federal investigators may have had, they were never charged, and the trail went cold. 2011 to 2015, a little black book and a public leak. The public didn't forget. In 2011, Alfredo Rodriguez, a former house manager for Epstein, was arrested for attempting to sell what he called the Holy Grail of evidence, a black leather-bound book listing hundreds of Epstein's contacts. Some names had a star beside them. The address book, eventually dubbed the Little Black Book, included everyone from royalty and politicians to fashion moguls and actors. Many of them denied any wrongdoing or said they barely knew Epstein. Still, the contents painted a picture of someone deeply embedded in high society. In 2015, that same year, Virginia Giuffre, then referred to in legal findings as Jane Doe No. 3, filed a motion in a federal civil suit. In it, she alleged she had been trafficked by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to high-profile individuals. Her claims named names: Prince Andrew, attorney Alan Dershowitz, and others. Both men denied the allegations, but the effect was immediate. For the first time, the public was seeing names directly linked to abuse allegations in sworn court filings. Media scrutiny intensified. That same year, journalist Julie K. Brown began working on what would become a landmark investigation. Her reporting, eventually published as Perversion of Justice in the Miami Herald, spotlighted how Epstein's case had been buried and how many voices had been ignored. "I had dozens of victims," Brown told CBS News in 2018, "and no one listened." 2019. Arrest, seized evidence, and a mysterious death. In July 2019, Epstein was arrested again, this time in New Jersey after returning from Paris on a private jet. The Southern District of New York unsealed a federal indictment. He was charged with operating a trafficking network involving minors in both Florida and New York. At the time of his arrest, the FBI raided his Manhattan townhouse. Inside, they found something chilling. Dozens of CDs and hard drives, large black binders filled with thumbnail images, cash, diamonds, and multiple passports. According to FBI Special Agent Kelly McGuire, some of the CDs had handwritten labels. Others were stored in safes or sealed bins. Some drives had already been marked with evidence tape from a previous raid in Florida. One detail stood out. In 2005, when Palm Beach police first searched Epstein's home, 6 hard drives had gone missing. Now in 2019, drives with similar markings were in his possession again. Also found were binders labeled with names and photos, but the court redacted those labels in all exhibits, citing privacy concerns. Judge Allison Nathan ordered them sealed, stating they contained identifying information for third parties. The day before his death, a trove of civil court documents was unsealed. Over 2,000 pages from a lawsuit involving Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell. The files included flight records, depositions, and more names: Bill Richardson, George Mitchell, Glenn Dubin, and others. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found unresponsive in his Manhattan jail cell. He had been awaiting trial. Attorney General Bill Barr issued a statement promising the investigation would continue. "Let me assure you that this case will not end," he said. "Any co-conspirators should not rest easy." 2020 to 2022. The Maxwell trial and sealed names. A year later, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested in New Hampshire. She pleaded not guilty to charges related to the recruitment and abuse of minors. During the 2021 trial, prosecutors introduced testimony from Lawrence Visosky, Epstein's longtime pilot. He named several well-known passengers on Epstein's jets: Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, but noted he never witnessed inappropriate behavior. The prosecution did not attempt to indict any of these men or present them as suspects. The strategy was narrow, focusing entirely on Maxwell and Epstein's crimes. By the end of the trial, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on 5 counts and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. No new names were charged. No list was introduced in court. The lingering question remained. Maxwell was found guilty of facilitating abuse, but to whom? In 2022, federal judge Loretta Preska began unsealing documents from Giuffre's civil case. Over the next 2 years, hundreds of pages were released. They included depositions, emails, and flight manifests, and identified roughly 150 names associated with Epstein, from financiers and scientists to royalty and celebrities. Some details made headlines. Stephen Hawking, for example, was listed as having visited Epstein's island for a science event. No allegations were made against him, but the mention triggered widespread speculation. Other names, including minors or unrelated parties, remained sealed. According to Judge Preska, there is no legal justification to continue sealing information simply to avoid embarrassment. 2023 to 2025. Political freedom and the promise of a list. As the unsealing process continued, political pressure mounted. In late 2023, right-wing commentators, members of Congress, and former Trump administration figures began demanding the release of a full client list. Kash Patel, a former Trump aide, claimed that Congress blocked the release of Epstein's alleged clients because of who's on that list. Former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, now a prominent conservative broadcaster, told his audience, "They're hiding this from you. The list is real." When Donald Trump returned to the campaign trail in 2024, he promised to declassify all Epstein-related materials. After his election victory, Attorney General Pam Bondi publicly declared that the list was sitting on my desk. In February 2025, Bondi made a theatrical release of binders containing Epstein documents to select media figures. But the files, largely pulled from already public materials, revealed nothing new. Conservative influencers expressed outrage. "This was a curated joke," one said. "I can't trust a single page." Bondi later claimed the FBI had been withholding evidence, including thousands of hours of video material, but provided no further proof. She hinted that more disclosures were coming, but none materialized. Then, in July 2025, the DOJ released a memo stating that, after exhaustive review, there was no incriminating client list and no credible evidence of a broader conspiracy involving other high-profile individuals. The memo concluded, "There is insufficient evidence to bring charges against uncharged third parties." Bondi reversed course. Jeffrey Epstein did not maintain a client list, she said during a press conference. The backlash was immediate, from both sides. Right-wing audiences who had been told the list was imminent felt betrayed. Meanwhile, House Democrats accused the DOJ of hiding information to protect Trump. A cryptic tweet from Elon Musk only added fuel. Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the real reason they've gone dark. In the end, the promised list became a political football. The New York Post called it a nothing burger. DOJ officials emphasized that nearly every major name connected to Epstein was already known, either through lawsuits, media coverage, or prior document releases. But none, they insisted, met the legal threshold for new charges. As of mid-2025, no new names have been indicted, and the idea of a sealed, explosive client list remains, if not disproven, then at least unsubstantiated by public records. Theory number 1. There was no list and no cover-up. The most direct theory is also the least exciting. There simply wasn't a client list in the way people imagine. According to this explanation, the so-called list is a myth, a blend of leaked flight logs, names in Epstein's contact book, and partial court testimony stitched together into something larger than it really is. In this version, federal investigators reviewed Epstein's materials extensively and found no organized document listing paying clients, co-conspirators, or blackmail targets. Instead, they saw what had already been made public, a dense web of contacts, only a handful of whom were credibly accused by witnesses. In July 2025, the Department of Justice memo stated unequivocally, "There is no incriminating client list. Investigators did not uncover credible evidence of a broader conspiracy beyond the charges already filed." Proponents of this theory include legal analysts and former prosecutors who argue that if any explosive document existed, it would have leaked by now, through trials, FOIA requests, or political pressure. As one Reddit user put it bluntly, there was never a neat list of clients. There was a mess of names and files, some damning, some nothing. People want a silver bullet, but this isn't a movie. In this interpretation, the idea of a secret, withheld list is more about public frustration than actual suppression. The justice system, it suggests, ran out of evidence, not will. Theory number 2. Elite cover-up to protect powerful people. This theory claims the list does exist, if not on paper, then in internal DOJ files, but it's being actively suppressed to shield powerful individuals. The logic here isn't hard to follow. Epstein was closely tied to people with global influence, presidents, royalty, billionaires, tech CEOs. If those names were connected to criminal acts, the fallout would be enormous. This theory spans political lines. For years, right-leaning commentators insisted that Bill Clinton and other Democratic elites were being protected. But after the 2025 DOJ memo exonerated all parties, many Trump supporters flipped the script, alleging that it was now Trump being protected. Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the real reason they've gone dark, Elon Musk wrote on Twitter in mid-2025. His post gained millions of views in a matter of hours. Others cite earlier cover-up behavior as precedent. In 2015, Amy Robach, an ABC News anchor, was caught on a hot mic saying the network had buried her story about Epstein for years. "We had Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on," she said, visibly frustrated. "There will come a day when we realize Epstein was the most prolific offender this country has ever seen. And I had it all." Supporters of this theory point to the 2008 plea deal, arranged in secret with high-powered legal help, as proof that Epstein had protection. The DOJ's crooked deal protected his co-conspirators, Senator Ben Sasse said years later. And former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta reportedly told colleagues that Epstein belonged to intelligence, and therefore he was instructed to back off. For believers, that's enough. If Epstein had compromat, then the lack of prosecutions is not a coincidence, it's a shield. Skeptics counter that court documents have already exposed many names. Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Richardson, George Mitchell, and yet none were charged. That may be more about legal standards than protection. Still, the theory persists because so many outcomes, from Epstein's plea deal to his death, seem to serve those in power. Theory number 3. Epstein was working for intelligence. This theory pushes the previous one further. What if Epstein wasn't just protected, but deployed? Here, Epstein is cast as a covert operative for a government agency, the CIA, FBI, or more often, Israeli intelligence. The idea: his homes and island were used to entrap powerful men, record them in compromising situations, and use the material for leverage, political or financial. It's a classic honey trap operation, and it has precedent in Cold War-era spycraft. This idea stems largely from Vicky Ward's reporting, which claimed that Alex Acosta, when questioned about the 2000 plea deal, said he had been told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. Acosta has never confirmed that publicly, but the statement took on a life of its own. Further fueling the theory is Ghislaine Maxwell's background. Her father, Robert Maxwell, died mysteriously at sea in 1991 and has long been suspected of having ties to Mossad. Ghislaine's proximity to Epstein and her role in managing logistics is seen by some as a continuation of that legacy. The theory gained traction when photos surfaced of Ehud Barak, the former Israeli Prime Minister, entering Epstein's townhouse in 2016. Barak acknowledged the visit, but denied knowing anything about misconduct. Critics weren't convinced. Authors like Whitney Webb have expanded this theory into full-length books, arguing that Epstein's money, real estate portfolio, and impunity suggest backing from state actors. Officially, the DOJ stated in 2020 that they found no evidence that Epstein was working for any intelligence agency. But as one web sleuth's commenter wrote, if he was an asset, they'd never admit it. That's the point. Critics of the theory say it requires too many leaps, and that Epstein's behavior can be explained by greed, depravity, and old-fashioned impunity. But for those drawn to this version, Epstein wasn't just a monster, he was a mechanism. Theory number 4. Ongoing investigations. Names still under seal. A more procedural theory suggests that names haven't been released because they can't be. Under this model, some individuals connected to Epstein may still be under investigation, and until charges are filed, federal guidelines prevent their names from being disclosed. This is consistent with how sex crime cases, especially involving minors, are typically handled. Some materials from the Jeffrey versus Maxwell case remain sealed for this reason. Federal Judge Loretta Preska, who ordered the partial unsealing of civil documents, stated in 2023 that she kept certain names redacted to avoid undue harm, or because they were not relevant to the public interest. Proponents of this theory include legal experts who argue that uncharged individuals are legally protected. One DOJ insider told ABC News, "You don't release a raw list of names. It's not just unethical, it's potentially unlawful." Examples are often cited. Jean-Luc Brunel, a French model scout tied to Epstein, was only arrested in 2020, years after allegations emerged. He died in custody in 2022. Jess Staley, a former JP Morgan executive, was cited in a lawsuit years after his Epstein ties were first suspected. Some 1,200 emails between them were later uncovered, referencing cryptic terms like Snow White and Beauty and the Beast. If charges are coming, this theory says it'll be slow and legal. But as of 2025, the DOJ's memo clearly stated, no further prosecutions are expected. To critics, that sounded like the end of the road. Theory number 5. Epstein took the names to his grave. The final theory is less elaborate and more tragic. It suggests that Epstein himself was the central hub, and whatever secrets he held, he died before disclosing them. In this version, Epstein knew who his co-participants were, but never wrote it down, never recorded it clearly, and never got the chance to bargain. With Ghislaine Maxwell refusing to name names and no cooperation from other insiders, the case hit a wall. Nothing can be proven, and the truth probably died with him, one Reddit user wrote. Michelle Licata, one of Epstein's victims, told reporters after his death, "We're never going to know the scope of it now." This theory doesn't require government collusion, spycraft, or suppressed indictments. It just acknowledges a grim reality. Some people take secrets with them, and the evidence, disks, binders, hard drives, may not tell the whole story. After years of speculation, legal pressure, leaked documents, and political posturing, the mystery of Jeffrey Epstein's client list remains, at least in the public's mind, unresolved. But when we strip away the noise and follow the evidence, a simpler picture emerges. The theory that holds. The most likely explanation is this. There is no formal client list, or at least not in the sense the public imagines. No official, centralized document. No typed ledger stored in a vault, no sealed file packed with names and dates and criminal transactions. What exists is a patchwork of records. Flight manifests, contact books, emails, depositions and court files, many of which have already been made public, albeit in pieces. From those pieces, the public and the media have reconstructed what amounts to a de facto list. A constellation of names in Epstein's orbit. Some are accused by witnesses, most are not. And crucially, as of 2025, the Department of Justice has made it clear, multiple times, that those documents do not contain the kind of prosecutable evidence people expect. In the DOJ's own words, there is no incriminating client list. Investigators did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. That statement wasn't vague. It was the final word from a multi-year federal review, and it came under a politically motivated administration that had every reason to produce something explosive, but couldn't. Why the myth persisted. To understand why this theory is the most likely, we need to understand the alternative theories, and why they ultimately don't hold. Start with the cover-up theory, the idea that the government or media suppressed a client list to protect elites. It's compelling, and not entirely implausible, especially given Epstein's 2008 plea deal. That deal did shield unnamed co-conspirators, and the process was anything but transparent. But fast forward to 2022 through 2025. Under public pressure and court orders, hundreds of Epstein-related documents were released. Judges like Loretta Preska ruled that privacy concerns no longer justified sealing names, and many were unsealed. Those names included politicians, academics, financiers, and celebrities. Some were alleged abusers, many were not. Some were mentioned simply because they attended events, appeared on flight logs, or had financial ties. In short, the world has already seen the list, or at least the closest thing to it. We got Gillian, but there were many, many other people involved, survivor Sarah Ransom said. I hope in the future we find out who they were. Her frustration is valid, but frustration isn't proof of suppression. The uncomfortable truth may be simpler. Evidence didn't meet the legal bar. The names weren't hidden. They just couldn't be prosecuted. The intelligence operative theory raises even more questions. Was Epstein working for Mossad, CIA, FBI? The theory hinges largely on second-hand claims, like Alex Acosta allegedly saying Epstein belonged to intelligence, but no documentation supports that. The DOJ said plainly in 2020 that it found no evidence suggesting Epstein was an intelligence asset. That's not to say Epstein didn't use intelligence-like tactics, blackmail, manipulation, control, but that doesn't make him a spy. It makes him dangerous and manipulative. As for the ongoing investigations theory, it still fails the test of time. Had that been the case, we would have expected charges by now, but the 2025 DOJ memo put a firm lid on those hopes. No further prosecutions are expected. Federal prosecutors, cautious by design, wouldn't make that claim unless the investigative clock had run out. Finally, the Epstein took the names to his grave theory, while emotionally resonant, doesn't match the digital trail. Epstein kept records. He had safes full of CDs, folders labeled with names and photos, and rooms packed with hard drives. Those materials were seized. They were examined, and according to the FBI, they did not produce the kind of evidence needed to build a broader conspiracy case. The truth didn't die with Epstein. It simply wasn't concrete enough to hold up in court. What we're left with. So what remains? A grim but grounded explanation. Epstein was the primary client of his own operation. He used wealth, intimidation, and a web of enablers to access and exploit girls. Ghislaine Maxwell helped him, and she was charged. Other employees like Sarah Kellen, Leslie Groff, and Jean-Luc Brunel were named or investigated, with varying outcomes. Brunel, for instance, was arrested in France and later died in custody. Others have faded from public view. But as for a formal roster of men Epstein trafficked victims to, it never existed in a prosecutable form. Yes, Virginia Giuffre and others have named individuals. Some of those names, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, became headline scandals. Andrew settled a civil suit. Dershowitz sued for defamation and won partial vindication, but none were charged criminally, and no corroborating witnesses or physical evidence emerged. Did Epstein and co. create a list on vellum, frame it and hang it on their wall? Probably not, wrote one Reddit user. Did they have clients? Yes. A list of these clients can be composed by investigators. That's the list. In other words, there is a list, but it's not what people want it to be. It's not a clean document with admissions of guilt. It's a loose, circumstantial collection of associations, some suspicious, others likely innocent. Why no charges? Occam's razor applies here. The simplest explanation is that the government couldn't prove it. Epstein operated for decades in private spaces, often with just one other person in the room. Records of abuse were rare. Witnesses were traumatized, sometimes inconsistent, and often isolated. And then, crucially, the 2008 plea deal happened. That deal effectively froze investigations into this network for over a decade. Had Epstein been charged more aggressively in 2006 or 2007, a broader case might have emerged. But by 2019, the trail had gone cold. Key witnesses were gone. Digital evidence, if it existed, was difficult to verify. And Epstein himself was dead. Even Pam Bondi, Trump's Attorney General in 2025, and a vocal advocate of the client list, ultimately walked it back. Jeffrey Epstein did not maintain a client list, she admitted. We've reviewed all available records. That statement was damning. Not for what it revealed, but for what it didn't. A systemic failure, not a cover-up. This isn't a satisfying ending. It doesn't offer a dramatic takedown of elites or a vault full of tapes. But it reflects a deeper, more troubling truth. The justice system often struggles to hold the rich accountable, not always because of conspiracy, but because of structure, timing, and burden of proof. The importance of the failure of the Florida case cannot be overstated, said Michael Reiter, the Palm Beach police chief who tried to bring Epstein down in 2006. That failure, compounded by years of inaction, allowed evidence to vanish and survivors to be dismissed. By the time prosecutors returned in 2019, it was too late to rebuild the case from scratch. So yes, people may have escaped consequences, but that doesn't mean the government protected them. It may simply mean that the system, already slow and cautious, didn't have enough to act. Sometimes the bad guy wins, said legal analyst Paul Butler on NBC. Epstein died before naming names. We may have to live with that. And that's what most likely happened.